What is up, everybody? Welcome to Destination the Show, episode 68. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined by Jeremy. What's going on, Jeremy? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing just fine, thanks. And joined by Theo. What's going on, man?
Oh, it's good to be back on the camera talking some Twins prospects. And we're seeing some news trickle in. It seems like these last 2 weeks more so than all off season. But hey, spring training's underway. Pitchers and catchers report tomorrow, at least for the Twins camp from when we're recording, and we'll have some game action, both college baseball and spring training baseball by this time next week. So it's looking good.
Yeah, looking good. Thanks for looking up. And Theo, while we're having you back on for the first time in a little while, maybe you want to tell folks about, and you don't have to if I'm putting you on the spot, but tell folks about your plans for Saints coverage this year. Is that still something you're doing? Because that's a unique angle, and it's going to be pretty cool.
No, definitely. Good news. I haven't told you guys yet, but I got an apartment locked down in St. Paul just yesterday, and I'm going to be about a 10-minute drive from CHS Field in my full-time job. So pretty much I got a pretty good gig going. I'm pretty much going to be at, I'd say 4 to 5 games for each homestand. I'm going to at least give one game off each of those because, those 6 games in a row can be a little taxing. But, I mean, we've been talking about it a lot. I mean, Nash Walker just put out a nice video on Twins Daily this last week about it. But this Saints team is probably going to be the most exciting group of prospects that they've had since becoming the AAA affiliate. So it'd be foolish of me not to be there as often as I can if I have that opportunity. So I'm very much looking forward to it. I know Tom Froming's going to have a new fanzine out here in the next week or two. And I had a little piece in there I'll tease about on the Saints, as I should, play to my strengths. But yeah, it's going to be very exciting. And, thinking of that, it's only a month and a half away. They just have a quick weekend series to open up the season at CHS Field. But I'm very much looking forward to that weekend and just seeing what comes of it.
Heck yeah, dude. Sounds awesome. We're looking forward to the insights from St. Paul. Before we dig into all of the Twins related things that we're going to cover today, some quick housekeeping, starting with ways that you can support the show, liking and subscribing on your podcast platform of choice. Any positive reviews and feedback you want to leave us is helpful for helping us grow the show. If you want to find our stuff on YouTube, we do have a dedicated YouTube channel that's at Destination the Show. All of our episodes are uploaded there. If you want to send in questions, you can do that on Twitter. The handle is at DTS_pod1 or on Blue Sky at Destination the Show. Or you can even send us questions via email. That's destinationtheshow@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And we've heard from so many folks over the past few days with great Twins questions that we might kick questions down the road to a full Twins prospect mailbag next week. We'll see how we go with time here, digging into our Twins top prospect list. But before we do that, we do have some off-season news to cover. Twins have made a flurry of moves in the last week or so. The latest, and perhaps least exciting, is signing first baseman Ty France for $1 million to a non-guaranteed MLB deal. Struggled quite a bit last year. Notably struggled a lot more after a hairline fracture in his heel. But Jeremy, we'll start with you. Thoughts on the Ty France edition? Did this do anything for you when you found out a couple of days ago? What's your takeaways here?
So it didn't really. And then when I saw, I mean, it did from the perspective of I'm like, wait a second, he's not very good, and we're gonna see him sign a major league deal and be on the 40-man roster. And then I saw the contract details, and I was like, that makes sense. And so I think you give the guy a flyer. He's a pretty horrible defensive first baseman. So we went from Gold Glove Santana to a disaster over there. But I think it's a pretty there's no risk to this. So if he's awful in spring training, you cut him. If he's even serviceable in spring training, you bring him north and you see what he can do over the first 3, 4, 6 weeks of the season. And then if he's awful at that point, you cut him and you lose very little. It's basically a let's see what he's got, and if there's nothing left, we're not out anything. So I don't mind a deal like this, given what we know about it, and there was obviously a hole at first base, and this is a chance for the Twins to fill it for nothing if it works out.
Yep. Theo, your thoughts? Prefer giving France a shot over there, or some combo of Miranda, Julian, or other that may have been locked into first base before the France signing?
It's pretty harmless. It just fills that 40-man roster spot as you got rid of Brent Hedrick to, clear that space open for him. So even if the non-guarantee, just so people understand, means they just get a spot on the 40-man roster. It's not a guarantee that they're going to make the team out of camp. So it's pretty much a safety net non-roster invitee position where the non-roster invitees could get cut coming out of camp versus the other way. So I think this really just alleviates some of the pressure of adjusting to the position on a more full-time basis for Miranda and Julian, because we're going to see them play at first base pretty frequently this spring. But, honestly, because of that heel injury, France became the worst defensive first baseman in all of baseball. And an old friend, Do-Hyun Park, pointed that out with his new baseball savant job yesterday with his signing with the Twins, and that, his -8 outs above average, -8 out of the -12 came after he really suffered that heel injury in early June. And I think I did see him play in Seattle when I was out there last year, and he didn't look as bad, but that was towards the end of May. So it's no risk, as Jeremy said, but I think, if he's not doing well, they're going to stuff him down in AAA because he has more service time than, Mike Ford. If Mike Ford's not doing well, come middle May, end of June, somewhere in that time frame, he's going to get cut from the AAA roster. But you can stuff Ty France down there, and if he's performing well, they like to have that extra depth, have the floor cleared out just so you have somebody there that's serviceable while you have your younger guys kind of figure out what they're doing positionally. And I wrote this on Zone Coverage earlier today, just, how this is going to affect the game of musical chairs at first base, because that position at the AAA level is more than filled. But again, nobody's even close to the same defensive tier as Carlos Santana. As you mentioned, you go from the guy who led all first basemen last year and outs above average at 12, I believe, no, 14. And then you go all the way down to -12. So there's a 26-point difference with what you got. So we'll see what happens with Ty France. For $1 million, it's not the end of the world. And, it's somebody. It's better than nothing, but, it's still 50-50. But the good thing about him is he gets on base, but just not how you would like all the time. Hit by pitches. He's led Major League Baseball in that in the last few years. He had 27 in 2021 to lead the league, and then 34 times. He's going for Craig Biggio's record if he could stay in the league long enough, if he gets 20 plus hit by pitches a season. So there's that to consider.
So I'm not sure that it's just as easy as sticking down AAA, because he's got over 5 years of service time. So even if he had options left, which I'm not sure if he does, he would have to be okay with that.
The non-guaranteed promises he's on the 40-man roster, so if he doesn't perform well enough in spring training, they can stuff him because it's a non-guaranteed contract.
No.
I thought that's what it meant.
No, it means that he's not guaranteed any money if they cut him.
Oh,
you have to have options to be sent down, and so he doesn't.
So he has to make the camp or then get cut.
Right, and I think basically it's essentially a minor league deal with an opt-out. Only it's a major league deal without the opt-out, right? It's the same thing. He just can't be stuffed down there, and he might willingly take that. Like, you can do that, right? You can accept that assignment. I think at this point he's fortunate to have an opportunity, and if the Twins say, "Hey, we're not going to keep you," we'll do that. Unless he's got, his agent will be looking for other opportunities for him,
right?
But yeah, I foresee him being either, yep, he's on the 26 man, or hey, thanks for giving us an opportunity, see you later type deal.
Yeah, that's similar to what they had with Tony Kemp last season in the minors, because he had opt out and then he left and tried to go somewhere else. I think it was the Reds organization, and they didn't even call him up. So that could be the same thing with Ty France.
But 6 minutes on Ty France, Jamie.
Okay, I got another question though, and I'm going to ask it. It's not about Ty France. You get 3 sentences or less each to give your like summary evaluation of the off season. And I specifically didn't say like grade. It doesn't have to be a grade, but just like how are you feeling, assuming this is it for the Twins offseason, adding Danny Coulombe, Harrison Bader, and Ty France? Jeremy, why don't you kick us off?
That was a yawn because it was boring and kind of pointless. Like they did the bare minimum that they needed to do, and it's not like a terrible thing. And when we talk about their prospect list, I think some of it makes sense. And I just, it's like they could have shored things up, spent a little bit more money, and maybe they still do that. But wow, like if we would have been on episode whatever it was, and this is way more than 3 sentences, right? It's just wow, bad. Like maybe not bad, just boring.
Underwhelming. Yeah, fair enough. Theo?
The business side of the team was more exciting than what's put out on the field. I mean, they got a replacement for Theo Bar. They got someone who's going to definitely be better than Manuel Margot defensively and just a bit better than his bat. As long as he gets one pitch hit, he's better than Margot. But, you know, with the ownership being up for sale, the team being a lot more accessible to watch this upcoming season through Twins TV, I think people got a little more excited about those sorts of things than they did about what's on the field. But now we're in this gray zone of, will a potential new ownership group really bring excitement back to this team if they're willing to put in more money than what we saw this offseason? And it's still more than what we expected 3 months ago. I'll say that, but that's still not passing the bar of what it should have been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I echo what you guys said. I think underwhelming, and if that's the price to pay for a better ownership situation starting at the beginning of this season and moving forwards, then I will happily accept that trade-off moving forwards. All right, let's get into the main item for today. The last couple of weeks, we've been running down kind of dueling top prospect lists. Today, we're going to go through that process with the Twins. We're going to go 1 through 10 in the Twin system and compare notes around how we stacked and organized these guys. We're going to do that across the 3 of us instead of just 2 of us today. I'm so excited to go through this process. So what we'll kind of do is start at 1, introduce the guy that we had at 1, talk through some high level numbers and dig into some questions and wonderings around that particular prospect. We'll head down the list, and as soon as we hit disagreements, we'll kind of get into it and have people weigh in at the end as to which order they agree with the most. So why don't we start with the number 1 prospect in the Twins system? Jeremy, who was that for you?
No surprise, I think, for any of us, it's going to be Walker Jenkins, and really not close. I mean, he's going to be a top 5 prospect globally, so there's not a lot of argument, I don't think, to be made for anybody else just because Walker Jenkins is as high as he is. And I think there's the outside shot that we see him make his debut this year. Maybe less, maybe it's less likely to happen than it is likely to happen, but I think you have someone that isn't really blocked by a lot of people, and he's hit. So as long as he stays healthy, that's the only thing, right? Walker Jenkins needs to stay healthy, and if he stays healthy, there's a great chance that we see him at Target Field this summer.
Yep. Theo.
Yeah, I think we could probably echo that sentiment for all the top 3 guys in the system, because I doubt we're going to differentiate much on who they are. But specifically starting with Jenkins, I think, him ending the season at AA is a clear indication that's where he's going to start the season. I think this regime with the front office has been smart about not rushing the guys up to the majors, unless it's 2021 and Buxton's down and you need someone who can play center field like Gilberto Celestino, but that's not going to happen to Jenkins now that they have Harrison Bader. So I think the big question is, again, it's health, and then how is that bat going to hit in the cold environment? I know Wichita's a little warmer in the early spring than St. Paul is, but by the time, I'd say late June, early July, All-Star break, it would not surprise me if that's when we see Walker Jenkins at CHS Field. And just to go back to how we started me being on the show today, I just cannot iterate enough how much people should be going to Saints games this year, because you're going to see the future wave of the Twins, some of these guys who might be making an impact on this team later this year. Jenkins might still be an outside shot. I think if everything goes perfectly, he might be late August, early September call up. And if that's the case, that's a huge achievement for that 2023 draft, and having one of those top 5 guys. And I think it's safe for us to all to say the other guy was prep player in that top 5 alongside with him, Max Clark. He's still a great player, but the Tigers seem to be taking a little more time with him. So, if the Twins can kind of have that little nudge of, oh, we got him up to the majors a little ahead of time than this other guy, and he's looking a lot better, that's huge. And I know we were all at the meltdown, and I don't know if Jamie was there for this part, but when Ryan Jeffers was on stage, John and Gleeman asked, since he's been working out with Jenkins, Ryan Jeffers has been working out with Jenkins this offseason. They asked him, like, what's with him? I mean, what's in the water in North Carolina that he's been drinking that's made him such a pure baseball player? And Jeffers really just iterated on that point that he is built to be a ball player, and the Twins really haven't had anyone like that since Joe Mauer. So it's huge to have someone like that, and it's really exciting to think that he's going to be playing baseball sometime in 2025. We just don't know when it will be.
Yep. Just to put a bow on the Jenkins discussion, appeared in 3 levels in 2024, started at Fort Myers, missed 60 games due to a hamstring strain, but finished, as the guys mentioned, at Wichita, hit 282, 394, 439, good for a 139 combined WRC plus across those 3 levels, 15% walk rate, 13% K rate, 6 home runs, which I think is the criticism that some folks have leveled, has been the home run power hasn't showed up yet, but I would add to that 34 extra base hits, amazing bat to ball skills, does not chase much, good speed, chance to stick in center field. Hard to imagine much more from a prospect in their age 19 season who missed 60 games of playing time. And the Twins should not be in a rush with Jenkins in 2025. He'll play this whole season at age 20. As you say, Theo, if and when he gets up to St. Paul, folks should be super excited. All right, Jeremy, back to you. Your number 2 guy and why, please.
So you threw it back to me here only because you want me to say this guy before you say this guy, and Theo says this guy. But Emmanuel Rodriguez was my number 2. I hate some of the profile, but there's other parts that are just super exciting. And so I'm always going to be a little hesitant to say, yep, he's got a chance to be a great prospect because of some of those shortcomings, right, with the swing and miss. But the ceiling is exceptionally high, and he played a little at AAA last year. I think that's where he'll start the season, and he really has an opportunity to be called up because there's not a lot of depth in the outfield, like real depth, and there's questions there. So I do like I said, parts of Rodriguez's profile. He's exciting as a prospect, and he will make his Twins debut this year. Again, he had some health concerns last year, right, with his thumb. You hope that that's all fixed up and good to go, but there's not as much gap between 2 and 3 as there is between 1 and 2, but Emmanuel Rodriguez is a global top 40 prospect. And so when you don't talk about a guy that much and he's that highly regarded, it's like talk about him that much in regards to being the number 1 prospect in a system. It's pretty neat for the Twins to have that in their system.
Yep. Theo?
Yeah, I know he's listed as a center fielder right now, but I think long term he's definitely going to be a corner outfielder, especially with Walker Jenkins coming up right behind him, who's definitely more better attuned defensively to be a center fielder and more of a better successor for Byron Buxton when he needs to move out of center field, whenever that is. But yeah, I mean, it's again, same thing. It's health. That seems to be the top talking point with all these guys, at least at the top end of the Twins prospect system. But I just can't stop thinking back to that inside the park grand slam I saw him hit at CHS Field. His first home run, by the way, at AAA. And that's not the biggest ballpark. And if you can find a way to get one of those, especially with the bases loaded, imagine what he's going to do at Target Field if he hits something well off, right center field scoreboard out there, even though they're just putting advertisements out there now. But, I think we're going to see him play a lot more time in the corner outfield spots, especially since, with Harrison Bader getting on the team with a contract, Deshaun Kersey Jr. is probably going to start the season in AAA as well. And I think Kersey Jr. is still much better defender than Rodriguez and a much better natural center fielder. So it will give him that time. I'd say, best case scenario for Rodriguez, if everyone's healthy and if he's really just making so much noise, we'll see him up by Memorial Day weekend. But he probably could, knowing how baseball is these days, if someone gets injured, whether that be Larnach, Bader, Buxton, or Wallner, he could probably get his chance soon after that happens. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, but again, it's just the health stuff.
Agree on the health stuff. Let's put some numbers on Erod's season with the caveat of significantly limited playing time by injuries. He hit 280, 459, 567, good for a 154 WRC plus. Walked a hard to believe 24% of the time, struck out 30% of the time. 110 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity. That is the best of any top 100 prospect in baseball. And you guys have covered a lot of the important details there, I think. Here's my mildly spicy take on Emmanuel Rodriguez. I think there's a reality in which Erod's in the AL Rookie of the Year conversation this year. And I think that's a long shot, right? You would bet against the Twins pushing him aggressively, the injury history, the possibility of a slow start at St. Paul. But if you had to pick one guy in the Twin system who has that kind of impact, Erod is the guy. And I know we've talked so much on the show about swing and miss concerns, and there is that to his profile. But I think the thing to monitor with Erod, if you're watching his games in St. Paul this year, is how aggressive is he with pitches that are thrown over the heart of the plate. He's obviously a fairly patient hitter, but I think that's the thing they have been working with him on the most is get aggressive when you see something good to hit and don't take that because otherwise Major League Pitching will take advantage. But that's my spicy Erod take. I think
just real quick, I think as you bring up, him being very selective and having a very selective strike zone. I mean, we saw pitchers do that to Edward Julian this past season, who is pretty similar in terms of the strike zone judgment. So I think, he's going to have that advantage of being a rookie and, being fresh to the league and being a little more aggressive this time around. So I think that's going to be a fun comparison. But fun might not be the best word to use, but just comparing those two players, both left-handed hitters who can really hit the ball well in very different ways. But just seeing how they improve upon their strike zone judgments is something to watch for both those guys in 2025. But obviously Rodriguez being a little more exciting, being the prospect still.
Yep. Okay, no disagreement so far. Theo, we'll come right back to you. Your number 3 guy, please, and your rationale.
Luke Keaschall. I was a little hesitant to put him there probably a year ago at this time, with Brooksley obviously still being a prospect. But I think what we saw from him being the Twins minor league hitter of the year this past season, which, there weren't too many guys to select from. I might have picked Carson McCusker because he was healthy all season. But, Keaschall was phenomenal before he went down with Tommy John surgery in the middle of the summer. And I think there's a good chance, if they can get him up to the majors, find him his positional home, which I think that's still up in the air because he is more profiled as a second baseman right now. But with the whole first baseman situation right now with the Twins and not feeling comfortable with anyone, he might be someone who could, just slot into that position, take a little bit of that pressure off on the defensive end and just really focus on his bat, which is his greatest strength. And I think that's what we're looking at there. And I don't know if he's going to make his MLB debut this season as early as Rodriguez, but I think he's someone who, if he does, it would be somewhere between where we project Rodriguez to do so and then Walker Jenkins. So I'm looking at that sometime in the summer months, June, July, beginning of August for him. So I think, again, someone we're definitely going to see in St. Paul this season, which it's great to say about all these top 3 guys. If you're not going to see him in a Twins uniform, you're still going to see him in this great state and see them play just a few miles down the road. So I look forward to that.
Yep. Jeremy, any disagreements on your number 3?
No. I had Keaschall at 3, kind of the end of that first tier for me anyway. And I think the interesting part of Keaschall is defensively he was limited because of the arm.
Yep.
And so maybe second baseman's his home, but maybe second base is not his home, and it's just that's where he's been limited to. And we see him evolve more into like the Willie Castro type after the season. Maybe not the super utility type that plays a lot of shortstop like Castro can do in a pinch. But I also think that with Correa on the roster and Brooks Lee on the roster and Royce Lewis on the roster, there's less of a need to have that shortstop, that guy that can play short. Not that all of those are great options, but at the same time, Keaschall doesn't have to be the backup shortstop. And so that's kind of where I peg him as he'll be a regular that doesn't have an everyday spot, the same as we look at Willie Castro. Castro's going to be a free agent after the year. Keaschall just kind of slides into that. I do think that Keaschall makes his debut this year because the dude just hits. And so as long as he's healthy and different, that I said it about Jenkins. I said it about Rodriguez. As long as he can prove that he's recovered, I think the Twins will take off the, whatever concerns they have. They'll be like, let's just go do it, do your thing. And there's going to be some recovering from it, right? And so if he's good and proves that he's ready to go, I think he'll be in Wichita for not long, and he'll hit his way right up at St. Paul. And if the Twins have any need for a utility type hitter, a guy that is versatile, and Rocco loves those guys, that he makes his debut with the Twins as well. And these 3 guys that we've talked about, that's way more exciting than Harrison Bader, Ty France, the other junk. And I think that's part of the reason why you didn't have to block these guys, because they're super confident that at least these top 3 prospects will be good major league players, or at least be good enough to get an opportunity to prove themselves at the major league level.
Yep. I think that defensive point is well taken. And I'll be really interested to see that. I mean, we know from back in his draft days that Keaschall has like a multi-sport background. I think he was a pretty good wrestler in high school. He's super athletic. He's fast. There's no reason why he wouldn't be able to cover corner outfield spots effectively. And as far as the health piece, Jeremy, that you alluded to, I believe Keaschall got a non-roster invite to spring training, which bodes well for how he's feeling coming into camp. Just about some numbers on Keaschall's season, so that we're being consistent here. Across high A and double A, hit 303, 420, 483, good for a 158 WRC plus. Walks 13% of the time, strikes out just 17% of the time. He had 15 home runs last season and 37 extra base hits. And you guys have outlined the questions beautifully. I was thinking and looking for a comp, not a player comp because I hate him, but like for production, because someone asked, like, what does this look like if Keaschall hits his like 75th percentile, 80th percentile outcome at the major league level? And my thought was Jorge Polanco, who is like a 2 to 3 win player. Sometimes has really good seasons, maybe once in a while has a down year, but just like a good everyday regular bat first profile, all that good stuff. So excited to see Keaschall. And guys, when was the last time the Twins had a trio of prospects this good? Jeremy, that might be a question for you, because I'm struggling to pull it out my brain, and I feel like you've been in the weeds on the system longer than Theo or I potentially.
I would guess when Buxton and Sano were prospects, that whoever was 3 made that a really good trio.
Right on.
I'd have to go look. I have a prospect handbook.
That's what I'm here for. I'm looking. Don't you worry.
Guys, I mean, how many years has Buxton been in there? Are we going back to like 2017 or?
We're talking like 2013. Buxton, Sano, Kyle Gibson.
That's really good.
But was Gibson a top 100 guy?
He was
20
for some
20
lists.
2014, so Alex Meyer fizzled. Cole Stewart wasn't great. Jose Barrios was 5 in that list.
2015, yeah.
Similar.
So let's
I
say
think
this
2013.
2016, Buxton, Barrios, and Kepler. That's pretty good.
Okay. So, but we can say, I think the point is, right, this is the best trio of prospects the Twins have had in 8 to 10 years in terms of
Minimum.
where they're sitting on top 100 list. Also, breaking news we're getting here, guys. Alex Bregman has agreed terms with the Red Sox on a 3-year, $120 million deal. So
Did we get a Passan bomb on that?
no, I think so. No Cubs, no Detroit Tigers. So he stays out of the Central.
Real quick, we do have a Red Sox site we can put this on when we clip it later. I don't understand why the Red Sox pursued him because they have Rafael Devers.
I think Devers is a horrible defensive player.
No, you're going to
anywhere.
get better defense, but now where are you going to put him? Is he going to be David Ortiz 2.0? Sorry, Twins fans, but is he?
I'm not sure. I'd be curious for the structure.
Where are you going to put Devers?
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't put him at third, he could play. I'm sure he can play first.
Yeah.
Well,
put him over there. But then Costas, where is he going? I'll be interested to see the structure of the deal. We'll dig more into that next week when the dust has settled from that move.
How about Bregman plays second?
Sure.
I don't think he would agree to that. That's the thing. You're going to have a bit of a powwow in camp over that. Also, I don't even know what Trevor Story's health is going to be like and if they're going to put him at short or second base.
Well,
interesting.
I feel okay about having those guys in my infield.
It's not the worst infield, but it's just figuring out who goes where.
It's not the worst infield.
It's not Ty France. Sorry, Ty France. We don't mean to hate on you.
Boy.
Okay, now we've got to the place where we might see disagreements for the first time. So anyone want to go first on their number 4 guy after the consensus top 3?
Well, since Zebby Matthews would have been consensus top number 4, but since he's like 13 innings away from being graduated from prospect status, I still went with another pitcher. The guy who was following his footsteps all last season's going from level to level, Andrew Morris. I have him at number 4. I think he's got a lot better strikeout stuff than Zebby does because Zebby's all command. Not to say that he doesn't have great command in the strike zone, but in terms of just, working outside the strike zone, trying to work with Morris swing and miss stuff, I think Morris has the upper edge there, and I think that's what really makes him invaluable. And talk about another guy we're going to see definitely start the season at St. Paul, even though that was where he performed the worst last season. He still had a 3.48 ERA in 7 starts over 33 innings. I think he really will perform well, especially after seeing how he was at Wichita and starting the season at Cedar Rapids. And the nice thing is, for all these younger guys who were coming up through the system and they're going to be in St. Paul this season, they're going to reunite with Jonas Levin, who's now the pitching coach for the St. Paul Saints. So I think this is really, and Carlos Hernandez too. I know he was at Wichita as well, where Morris really dominated this last year, just to include that. So I think there's a great group of mentorship and coaching for these guys to really just do what they need to do to find in their own skills like Morris will, so he can, at some point this season, make his MLB debut.
Jeremy, did you have Andrew Morris at number 4?
No, but I had Andrew Morris in a group of 5 players that I was like, any of these guys could be 4, any of these guys could be 5, any of these guys could be 6, any of these guys could be 7, any of these guys could be 8.
So let's do it this way. Why don't you tell us where you had Morris, and we'll dig into where you had him, where I had him, and then we can kind of tease out any more Morris discussion, and then we'll go back to our number 4s because I also did not have him 4th.
So I had Andrew Morris at the bottom of my tier at number 8.
Okay.
And for me, we've talked about it a lot. I err towards upside. Mm-hmm. And despite the fact that he's 22 and he's already made it to AAA, I think he's probably and there's a better chance that he gets there. But he's a starter that will take the ball 33 times and probably doesn't start a playoff game, right? And I hope I'm wrong, and he could certainly prove me wrong because he had a great year, and it's an up arrow. But for me, that's where I view him. Like, he's going to be a back end of the rotation guy, and he's probably going to be very consistent. But I had him at 8, and I do again think that he makes his major league debut this year, and he's great depth right now for a team that is going to need it. And no qualms with him at 4, but I view him as kind of a lower upside option than some of these other guys, and that's why I had him at 8.
Yep. And that's really interesting that you mentioned, Jeremy, this cluster of 5, because we've talked through, and you can haggle over the subdivisions of 1 through 3, but there's clearly 3 consensus top 100 guys, 2 of those being like elite. And then I agree that there's a kind of a cluster of 5 that are a little bit interchangeable. And so I'll be interested to see how the order stacks up for the rest. I had Mars closer to where you had him, but I think about him in a similar way. So for me, he was 7th, 133 innings pitched in 2024, which is extremely encouraging, right? Like really workhorse type guy, 2.37 ERA, 2.86 FIP, struck out 25% of guys, walked just 6%. There's a lot of similarities to Zebby Matthews for me. Elite strike thrower with pretty much the exact same arsenal. So 4-seam, cutter, slider, curve, change up. Don't be surprised if there's a tweak to that mix when this 2025 season rolls around. I think the keys for Morris are a couple of things. Also, some shared traits with Zebby in terms of next steps. So the secondaries are key. Can he add velocity to the secondaries, and can he generate enough swing and miss on his secondary pitches? And then he's another guy where it's a ton of strike throwing. He's throwing strikes at like 69, 70, 71% clip. And with that, sometimes you're throwing too many strikes, and you got to figure out the times and counts and leverage spots of when you need to leave the zone and with what pitches, and refine command, not control, command of those off-speed pitches to leave the zone at the right time. So I think he's firmly in that like 100 to 150 range if a lot of the industry lists that we look at and enjoy were to expand. Absolutely going to debut this year, and kind of agree, Jeremy, at the moment with your assessment of like the projection is probably a back end starter, but there's always room for a half to a full step more depending on how this season goes. So why don't we come back then, Jeremy, to who'd you slot in at number 4 and why?
So maybe not the most popular choice here, but a guy that I believed in for a long time. Connor Prielipp is my number 4. I think there's a real chance that he ends up being a bullpen guy. But I also think that of all of the players that we'll talk about, he's got the highest upside, right? He could be a left-handed number 1 pitcher. The likelihood of that is probably relatively low. But his arsenal, when healthy, which he hasn't been in, much of his life, is crazy good. And so where do we see him this year? Probably in Double-A. To start, do we see him as a starter all year? I don't know. He hasn't thrown a lot of innings. But if he can stay healthy for the whole year, I'd be shocked if he wasn't pitching for the Twins by the end of the year. And if he can prove that he can take the ball every 5 or 6 days, there's the upside that's just hard to argue with. When Baseball America would put grades on guys in their prospect handbook, and then they'd put the risk, like there's extreme risk because it could be over. Arm could blow it again, career's over. But I think the upside is just a little bit higher than all of these other guys. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out. I don't know if it's going to be great. And I think that's why we'll see a wider range, not only with the 3 of us, but in general. I just think when you have what he has, the fastball, the slider, the change, there's a chance for really, really, really huge things from the young lefty.
So I did not have Prielipp at 4, so we'll dig more into Prielipp, and then we'll come back to a third pick at 4, which is fun, right? That's the whole object of the exercise. So I'm curious, Theo, did you have Prielipp in your top 10? If you did, where'd you have him? What's your rationale? And if not, what's your thought process on leaving him out altogether?
No, I did have him in there. He was at number 9 actually for me, and I think
Okay.
it's he is probably the most fragile arm in this Twins farm system. In all truth, I think his days. I just look at him as someone who's going to be a reliever, and with one of your 3 left-handed pitchers on the 40-man roster being claimed off waivers, so you can add Ty France. That's just putting all the more pressure to get Prielipp up to the majors sooner versus later. And I think, if you really want him to have a longer career, you got to just use him that way and just have him go out every 3-4 days a week and get 3 outs. And I think he could be, with his stuff, in the more traditional sense, be a dominating closer. I think that's his best bet. I think he could definitely just be phenomenal in that role for his entire career. So if you know how fragile his arm is, why risk it? And that's why I have him a bit lower, because they still don't know how they want to utilize him. Obviously, once spring training, gets into full gear, we're going to have a little more clear answers on what his position is going to be. I think it's still safe to assume he's going to start the season at Double-A. Obviously, what we saw of him in August and September looked really good, but it's still a limited amount. But we still saw, what made him such a dominating starter when he was at the University of Alabama. So now just seeing where that balance can be figured out, I think, like Jeremy said, it's probably likely he starts the season in the rotation, but I really find it hard to believe that if and when he makes it up to St. Paul that he's going to have time in the rotation. I mean, you look at Travis Adams, one guy who's been a starter his entire minor league career. Saints started using him as a really well. I'm just going to Jalen Nolan, left-handed, another guy, but the Saints only used. I'm just using examples of guys who are starters as soon as they get up to AAA, moving straight into the bullpen, because I mean, look at that rotation outside of other guys we've already talked about. David Festa, if Paddock is healthy opening day and still with this team, he's going to be in the rotation. So that moves Festa into St. Paul. Morris, I think it does. That's what I'm going with right now. But I'm probably going to be proven wrong in 2 weeks when Paddock's injured and or traded. But
well, probably not and. He's not getting injured and traded.
Well, I said and or.
These are exactly the interesting, these are the machinations I wanted to get into, though. And that is a good point, Theo, about the depth of pitching at AAA, at least to start the season, is going to be crazy, assuming there's not a large number of injuries to kind of backfill spots. So I had Prielipp at 5. And I think what you guys have highlighted is your placement on the list depends on whether you're evaluating him as a starter or a reliever, right? Rotation or pen shapes the evaluation. For me, I'm gonna place someone based on what I think their best outcome can be in terms of role. And so to put a cap on Prielipp's numbers, and you've covered all of the important points right already, but only 23.1 innings pitched in 2024. But how about this? 1.13 FIP, 7% walk rate, 45% K rate, which is, that's just mind-boggling. Fastball in the mid-90s, slider with 3,000 RPMs, changeup with 16 inches of horizontal break. That's a nasty 3-pitch mix. Here's one thing to throw in the mix with Prielipp that I'm curious for y'all's takes on. I don't think the performance is going to be the limiting factor with moving him up through the levels. I think it's going to be the pitch count, because at the end of last season, he was throwing, I want to say 35, max 40 pitches, right? I think it's fair to assume that he's going to start in Wichita this season because he was making everyone in Cedar Rapids look silly. But max, you're going to have him throwing 50 pitches
through the entire month of March. Well, they start the season in April. So April, I'd say he's probably going to get to 75 by mid to late May.
Yeah.
And so that's what they do with a lot of these guys in the minor leagues. And we're going to see that a lot. Prielipp goes out for 2 to 3 innings, then someone piggybacks him for the next 2 to 3, and then the next guy or 2 guys come in.
I just can't see now that he's finally back after however many missed months. And Jeremy, when we last talked about Prielipp, you came up with the stat of how many innings he's thrown in like 5 years, and it was horrifying. It was like 40. I just can't believe that they're gonna move aggressively with him. Like I'm thinking about Marco Raya, who had one like shoulder thing, and he's going through a lineup twice max. And it's just making me very curious about how are they going to use Prielipp in a way that balances his nasty stuff, his likely ability to impact the major league roster positively with also the health piece and just the uncertainty around the arm.
All good questions.
I looked at the stat again. Since his freshman year at University of Alabama, only 58 total innings.
Yeah.
He's a reliever, but run him out there as an opener, if nothing else, to start the year.
And so the last thing I'll say on Prielipp, and this is my rationale for having him fifth, right? One is the starter piece and evaluating him as a starter. But I think the other thing that we haven't talked about maybe quite enough is the left-handed piece. Left-handed starting pitchers with that stuff are uncommon. Like think back through Twin systems the last number of years. When was the last left-handed starter that had stuff this good? Maybe Liriano? I don't know. Maybe there's
Johan.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's yeah.
And so that's just for me, it's really hard to get over the like compulsion to be like, you gotta try and get this guy to the majors as a starting pitcher. And maybe there's a scenario where next year is kind of like a bridge season where he pitches like 20 innings in relief in the pen just to build up arm strength and stamina and all of that good stuff. And then maybe you try for the rotation in 2026, but it's hard for me to turn away from that, knowing how tantalizing the stuff is.
I just think that they're going to try to keep him as consistent as possible. And you can do that as a starter when you're playing 6 days in a row. Like he'll pick a day, Thursday, and Thursday's just the day he's going to pitch. And he's going to pitch 45 pitches to start, and then the next month 50, and he's going to strike out 8 guys throwing 40 pitches, and it's going to be like, oh, this guy's pretty good.
Yep.
Let's add a little bit to it. So, but yeah, I think everything that we're saying is right on. There's a huge range of outcomes, and the high range is pretty good, and the low range is pretty awful.
Yep. Okay, we're still working on number 4s, even though we've dotted around several prospects. I'll do a quick overview of my number 4, then you can tell me what you think of this guy. My number 4 is shortstop Kaelan Culpepper, Twins first round pick in the 2024 draft. He hit .242, .333, .94 across 26 games in his debut, starting at low A. I think he was only there for about 9 games, and he was promoted to Cedar Rapids, 110 over C+. Walks 10% of the time, strikes out just 13%. He had 8 extra base hits in 26 games. He definitely slowed a little bit in moving to Cedar Rapids. We talk a lot about this for newly drafted prospects, how they're kind of in a grind of the longest season of their young careers. And so tending not to weigh or read too much into that. At Fort Myers, the stat I like is that he didn't swing and miss once at a pitch in the strike zone in the games that he played there. He has a good chance, I think, to stick at shortstop. Absolutely a plus arm. At worst, I think he's going to be a good defensive third baseman with a good hit tool and maybe a little bit more pop than people are giving him credit for. And I'm always going to value a hitter a little bit more highly than pitchers as a general rule of thumb. So Culpepper came in at 4th for me. Jeremy, where'd you have him in your top 10, and what are your thoughts on him and his debut?
I had Culpepper at 5.
Okay.
Considered him at 4. Would have had no issue putting him at 4. I guess I'm a little less optimistic that he ever hits for power, and a little less optimistic that he sticks at short. And so for me, when you have a slick fielding third baseman who doesn't have the bat to necessarily play a corner, I just ding him a little bit for that. And I could be proven wrong on both of those counts, but that's kind of where I'm at with Kaelan Culpepper. I think he was a good addition to this organization because of what he is and what the Twins have and don't have. I'm a little lower on him than you are, but I had him at 5.
Right on. Theo?
I'm lower than both of you, but not by much. I have him at 6th.
Okay.
I think, again, the power, it's not really there yet. I think, fortunately for him, there's no need to rush him up the system with how much infield depth this organization has at the upper levels of the minor leagues. So him being at Cedar Rapids for most of the season wouldn't surprise me, just to see, what they can do with his bat, where they can maybe develop power, especially if you might be a third baseman. You need to be at least a 20 home run guy in the majors these years to really, be a full-time third baseman. Alec Bohm is the one exception because he's driving in runs, and even the Phillies didn't even want to consider keeping him this season, but they are. So I think, he's a guy, there's just a little inexperience, obviously just being drafted, and I'm tend to be someone where if they don't have as much experience in the minor leagues, especially, the rookie league guys, I'm going to rank them lower typically just because they're younger. We haven't seen much of them. But he's still a top 10 guy, easily. Top 6, I think, is just fair. And I think, we'll just see how he develops, especially in the infield. Shortstop, he could definitely be that guy coming up the line who can be a good backup to Correa at shortstop, probably better than what we've seen from Brooks Lee of late, and maybe even from especially Keaschall. So there's that to look at. But it's just, seeing where that power develops and playing to his strengths as a hitter.
Fair enough. No quibbles with that. I do think before we do a quick check on where we are in this order here, evaluating and placing the just drafted guys, I think, is one of the toughest assignments when you're making a list. I'm going to put money on Culpepper to be a top 100-ish candidate if he has a strong 2025. Okay, so that's all of our 4s. Has everyone shared their 5s? I feel like we haven't had everyone's 5s yet.
Okay, so we got 6 guys covered. So there's 4 left. I still need my number 5, 7, 8, and 10. I think you both still need your number 6.
Okay, let's start with your 5.
So we'll start with my 5, which is Marco Raya. Devastating curveball. Pretty nasty stuff with that. I know he's someone who's had to have the shorter leash coming up the system, and I've been critical of that, but getting to see him make his final start of the season up in St. Paul and what he has going for himself there, obviously I think he's got a little more higher upside than Morris, but I kind of value Morris more because I see him being a starter more long-term, whereas Raya, I think, might have more of what we talked about with Prielipp earlier, where they're going to probably start him as a starter for a little bit. He might be great there, but if, because of the shorter workloads, maybe going 6 innings at most, he could develop into a reliever. I kind of see, and you're not going to hate this, Jamie, because it's a player comp, this could be a Tyler Duffy type in the upside.
Interesting.
Where he would, remember, 2015 Duffy, when he came up, dominated as a starter. But then they kept him that way. Obviously, Raya throws a little bit harder. He's got a lot of better swing and miss stuff with his pitches than Duffy did back in 2016 in that team. But I think I see a similar path for Raya in the long term, and add his name to the list of guys who will make their major league debuts this season. And it's just a matter of when, not if.
Nice. Okay, so Raya is your number 5. Jeremy, I'm guaranteeing that he's in your top 10 somewhere in this cluster of dudes. Where you got him and why?
I'm number 6.
Okay.
And I agree with a ton of the things that Theo said, and I think that's probably why we rank him similarly.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, I guess, part of my belief is skewed by the fact that the Twins have been so careful, which means that they're seeing something that's very much worth protecting. And they've now got him to the point where he's at AAA. He was throwing 5 innings. He threw 5 innings in his last start with the Saints. I'm not super convinced that his fastball is what a real starter needs him to be. I'm not super convinced he can get left-handers out. And that might be part of the reason that we don't see him as a starter. But he keeps getting extended. He keeps getting better. and he's a little smaller, right? But I get the almost the Jose Barrios feel with him sometimes, and I think there's upside there to prove me wrong. But if he ends up as a multi-inning reliever over the course of the next handful of years, that wouldn't surprise me either. But yeah, like I said, I have 5 guys that are very, very close to each other, and Marco Raya kind of is different than what I normally do because I would say the ceiling's maybe not as high, but the floor I think is pretty high too. Very similar to Morris. I just have them 2 spots separate.
Right on. The Twins are doing well if they get any value out of the 2020 draft. To be honest, that year was such a cluster, and I believe Raya was a 4th round pick that year. So I have Raya
3rd or 4th, yeah.
Yeah, 4th round.
I have Raya at 8. He's the bottom of my cluster of guys, but I would emphasize again that like I see them similarly to Jeremy in like a very similar range. 97.2 innings in 2024, 4.05 ERA, 3.88 FIP, struck out 25% of guys, walks a little bit high, 10.5%. He added a cutter. That's a new pitch in 2024, which Jeremy maybe speaks to your commentary on his fastball a little bit. I know it's like very trendy to throw out phrases like X year is important for this prospect, but that really does feel true to me about Raya, that like 2025 is very important in shaping what is his role going to be with the major league team moving forwards. Is it you're going to get a chance to start? Is it you're going to eventually find some impact as a reliever? Either of those would be valuable outcomes, given that he was a prep righty taken in the 4th round of the COVID draft. I don't see any reason to think that they will be in any rush with Raya at St. Paul. I believe he had 1 start at the end of 2024. Yep. He should get a ton of runway at AAA. And I hope that we see some 3rd time through the order with him. If you look at a rolling pitch chart, or excuse me, if you look at a rolling pitch count for Raya, there is a steady increase over the last couple of seasons. It's just almost imperceptibly small. So I think what the Twins might hope is by the end of this season, he's had a successful year, mostly in AAA. His pitch count is up to like 85. He's going through the order a 3rd time on starts where the stuff is working well. And then, if and when the opportunity arises and the need is there, he can contribute to the major league team potentially down the stretch. So I have him at number 8. Jeremy, have we done your number 6?
We need your number 6.
My number 6.
Because he did Raya and I have Culpepper there, so it's all you.
I'm glad, Theo, you're keeping track of things over here. My number 6 is right-handed pitcher, Charlee Soto. Fresh off debuting in a industry top 100 list for the first time. He appeared at 100 on ESPN's list. Here's the reasons I like Soto. We've talked about Raya and Morris. Those are 2 starters with a little bit smaller stature. Charlee Soto is not that. He is a large frame dude. He looks the part. I believe he's pushing like 6'5". He added 2 new pitches, last year, a sinker and a cutter, through 74 innings in his first full season of pro ball. The fastball is up to 98 miles per hour. It does not have great shape. That was a reason for adding the sinker. His ERA looks ugly, 5.23, but the xFIP was 3.80, and I believe he put up like a 3.5 ERA over his last like 12 to 15 starts. Struck out 26% of dudes, walked 10%. That is a little bit high, but you started to see him put things together down the stretch. And back to Jeremy's point of I'm going to lean into upside. The upside of Charlee Soto is a guy who starts a playoff game and whose fastball is touching triple digits. And it's hard to get away from that when you dig into some of the underlying numbers. So again, for me, in this cluster of dudes in the like 4 to 8 range, and I have him right in the middle of that pack at number 6. Jeremy, where'd you put Soto?
I have Soto 7. He was the last guy for me in that range.
Okay.
And the highest rated pitcher that I have that I don't think makes his debut. So he's got a shot to climb this list a ton. Also has a chance to drop, right? Because there's a wide range of outcomes for a guy that hasn't pitched a ton besides just throwing in low A. But yeah, you mentioned it. Might throw 100, might be a playoff caliber starter if all things line up, because there's tons of upside. And he's got a bigger frame, and typically that's something that's more durable. But I don't know enough right now to be like, yep, I'm confident in him. He hasn't had enough success at any level really, because he's still young. So I'm with you on that. I had him at 7, but like I mentioned, you could have made the argument at 4. You could make the argument that he is the highest rated pitching prospect in the organization, and I would say, okay, yep, I'm fine with that. So for me, he's my 3rd ranked pitcher and my 7th overall ranked player.
Right on. Theo, what you got on Soto?
We have our first player who's not ranked in any of our top 10s.
Wow.
Well, all of ours, I should say.
Okay.
I guess with me, I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop with him. I mean, obviously, he was 18 years old in a league filled with guys who are around his age or a little bit older. He's adjusting, and he got batted around and experimenting. And it's the right thing to do at this age. But with how hard he can throw, he's got a bit of a better frame to be throwing a lot of heat. But I'm just waiting for that other shoe to drop in. You know, the injury happens before he makes his MLB debut, whether it's Tommy John, a blown out elbow, or something else. I just am waiting for that. And then is he going to be the same guy we're ranking in the top 100 like so many other pitching prospects through the last decade who gets his major league debut and the upside we once projected is no longer there? I think I need to see how he goes between low and high A this next season, because the luxury with him being so young, the Twins don't have to rush him up through the system. He's not even going to turn 20 until the end of August. So, you know, it's pretty much his full age 19 season. I mean, there's a lot to like there, but I just need to see a little bit better performance and the health durability lasts into his age 20, 21 seasons before I can really be convinced that he's a top 3 prospect in the Twins system. I think if he has a good year this year, I'd be willing to put him in that top 100, but he's just not there for me yet because of, you know, the what ifs, and he's a lot more prone to that than a lot of these other guys.
Dang, hard to impress, Theo, but I dig it. I like the disagreement. That's exactly the point of this thought exercise. We'll see how he does. And I think Soto is going to pitch all of this year at Cedar Rapids, right? And so to your point about the age, I mean, he's going to be like 3 years younger than the average pitcher at that level. And so
2 or 3, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how he does with high A. Okay, so that's all of our number 6s. I've shared my number 7. Has anyone still got to share?
I've shared mine.
Okay.
That would be me.
All right, let's have it, man.
The hardest throwing knuckleball in all of baseball right now, Cory Lewis.
Okay.
How can you not love that? I mean, come on. I mean, I will admit Charlee Soto has his upsides, but a guy who can throw a knuckleball almost 90 miles per hour, and he's got some good stuff going for him as well. And I know he's had his ebbs and flows with Wichita, but he had a really good final start of the season in St. Paul. I would not be surprised if he starts there again this season. I really like what Cory Lewis has to offer, and it's so unique that you just can't be fascinated by it. And, you know, his longevity, he could be, may he rest in peace, you know, player comp, Tim Wakefield. He could be another Tim Wakefield where he starts out as a starter, see how those things work out, and then goes back and forth between the starter reliever and the longevity. I just really like what he has to offer, and the Twins can use him either way, and he can still be a dominated pitcher, whether he's starting the game or coming out of the bullpen.
Right on. Jeremy, did Cory Lewis make your list?
No, I had 5 guys that would be in some order, be 11th through 15th, and Lewis is in that list. I've always been high on Cory Lewis. Shoulder things just kind of concerned me a little bit, especially when it was something that was supposed to be minor and then turned out that he missed a large chunk of the season. But non-roster invite was going to get an opportunity to impress, and could very easily move himself back up into that. But just outside of the top 10 for me, I do think that I personally think that Cory Lewis has a chance to make his debut this year as probably a relief pitcher, but he could be nasty there, and I like it. I like the fact that Theo had him there. Just not for me right now.
Yep, right on. Well, I did. So I have Cory Lewis in my list. He is 10 for me, and I gotta keep it real with you guys. I really struggle with 10. I was back and forth between like I could just stick like one of 5 guys in here, and I don't think I would feel a ton more strongly. Echo a bunch of the things that Theo said. He was the Twins minor league pitcher of the year in 2023. Started last season with on the IL with a shoulder and pitched 79 innings, 2.51 ERA. So the strong performance remained. 3.83 FIP, a ton of strikeouts, 28% of guys. The walks are still too high with Lewis, and so I think there's 2 questions I have, 2 wonderings coming into 2025 that are relevant. Number 1, more consistent strike throwing. His walk rate in the minor leagues has been in the like 12 to 14% range. That is too high for a starter. And so he's going to need to limit that. And then my other wondering, and this is really the one that's related to the injury and just maybe just the general wear and tear of the season. End of the season, his fastball velocity was down quite a bit. It was sitting like low 90s, 90, 91, as opposed to 92, 94. That's a really good pitch for him. Really good shape. He has good extension, gets down the mound really well, but I don't think it's going to play in the majors if it's sitting 90, 91. And so I'll be interested to see, with hopefully a healthy offseason behind him, can he add a little more juice back to his fastball? And I 100% agree with Jeremy that he's another guy that has a good chance to make his major league debut in 2025. And that's why I slotted him in at 10. I was like, who is the person who's most proximal to the majors who can make an impact of these cluster of guys that have roughly the same value? And I use that as kind of the tiebreaker. Okay. So we're on, what was that for you, Theo? 8?
7.
7.
So you both have had 8. I have not had my 8.
Okay, let's have it.
Brandon Winokur. I still have a lot of belief in his upside, and I put him there for that very reason, despite his shortcomings since he was drafted in 2023.
Brandon Winokur. Okay. Jeremy, did he make your top 10?
He made it at 10
Okay.
for the simple fact that, like Theo said, lots of upside. I have huge concerns about a swing and miss. Funny that you went Lewis when you're like, when push comes to shove, I'm going to rank a hitter over a pitcher. That's what I did. Because for me, the next year started at 9. So 9, 10 were hitters. And then my next 3 probably were pitchers. And so I do like Winokur. I don't know where he ends up. I'm assuming it's going to be probably in right field.
Yeah.
But there's so much weird stuff about this profile, right? Like playing shortstop.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Massive power and all the strikeouts. And so it's enough that it's like, okay, let's keep an eye on him. I'd anticipate that he's going to be in Cedar Rapids, right? And I think him being in Cedar Rapids this year is going to maybe not answer questions, but at least point us in the direction of answers for how this guy's career trajectory looks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Love that. I also have Winokur on my list. I think this is my last guy on my list. He's 9th for me. Hit 249, 347, 434. Spent his entire season at Fort Myers, 116 WRC plus. The power is a calling card there. Max exit velocity north of 111 miles per hour. That ranks very favorably at his age and level. 14 home runs, 34 extra base hits overall, 28% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate. I think there's just work to do on the approach and the swing decisions. Like, he's hyper aggressive against fastballs, but he is also an incredible athlete, like plus arm, fast, maybe center field, maybe somewhere else, but he has legit athleticism. And I kind of think it's just like a project of untangling insane athleticism. It's like it's an athleticism puzzle, and it's really interesting. Like, he is a singular, unique profile in the twin system, and I think it's a really fun follow no matter how it goes. I'll be really, really hyped to track him and see the
typically the word, like the phrase lottery ticket is used for pitchers, right? I think this is a very much a great example of when it could be used for a hitter.
Yeah.
Because the range of outcomes is extremely wide. I think the likelihood is that it's not going to be great, but if he can hit, like literally and figuratively, the upside is enormous. And so that's what makes it, like you said, it's a fun follow, and this year's going to be, it's going to tell the story of a lot of things, I think.
Yep, I agree with that. Okay, I've completely lost track of where we are now. I think, does anyone have an 8 they need to share?
Nope. So I think all we have left is Jeremy's 9 and my number 10.
Okay, cool. Jeremy, hit us with your 9.
So my number 9 is Kyle DeBarge, and I didn't struggle with it so much because when it came to the draft, I didn't have him much lower than Culpepper. And so I probably liked him more than Culpepper coming into the draft. And so for me, it was like, I can't discredit what I felt about him because he didn't hit for power in a small sample of his professional debut. I think there's a lot of Brian Dozier there with maybe more run. And so pull side power, and Brian Dozier was one that wasn't really appreciated. Probably spent a lot of time in the back halves of 10 and then turned into a 40 home run guy. Is that going to be Kyle DeBarge? I don't think so. But I do think that there's an opportunity for, when we talk about hitters, that guys that just kind of jump onto the radar for people, and it's like, where did this guy come from?
Yep.
I think Kyle DeBarge is going to be that guy. Maybe not like Luke Keaschall-esque, but very well could be in a different sort of way. So I see him as someone that could be a big mover. And how do we view him compared to Culpepper 300 days from now?
100%. That's 100% the right question, in my opinion. And so I cycled Cory Lewis and Kyle DeBarge in and out of the 10th spot for me. And I just wrote a prospect preview for DeBarge up at Twins Daily with kind of a summary of his 2024 preview to 2025, and everything you say, Jeremy, is spot on, right? It's a lot of boxes that you like to see checked, like really good bat to ball skills, really good swing decisions. He didn't have a great debut, but it's like 20 games. And what we saw a lot of was him a really high ground ball rate. I think his average launch angle in his Fort Myers debut was like 2 degrees. So he's just grounding out all the time. Is that a meaningful sample size to evaluate? Absolutely not. So let's put it this way. If we were to place bets, because we've talked about how many guys are maybe going to make their major league debut this season, about who is going to vault into this top 10, I would put a decent chunk of my chips on DeBarge being one of the biggest potential risers, given his skill set and his performance in college. Theo, you're number 10. Round us out. Bring us home, man.
Yeah, Rayne Doncon. I really liked the hitter he was from the beginning of the season until he went down with an injury at the beginning of August, and that really impacted the downside of his stock. But if you really want to make up for this Manuel Margot trade, I think Doncon is going to be a much better hitter than Noah Miller ever will be at the major league level. But he's someone who's going to have to find that defensive home, and could turn into a Kyle Farmer, Willie Castro type, where he's bounced around position. They really use him at shortstop a lot still, but I think he's more second baseman, if anything, between the three infield positions in the long term. But I think as long as he's healthy, that bat is going to be much more to his upside, and making that MLB debut and just obviously not going to be the season. I think he's going to restart the year at Cedar Rapids where he finished and, try to reconfigure his things after his injuries. And if he's having a good season, we're going to see him in Double-A at some point. And this is a guy who was not doing too well for himself when he was traded. I know his 2023 numbers in the minor league system look really poor. So he had a huge climb before he got injured at the beginning of August. And I think that's what I'm looking at there. And because he's been in the minor league system a little longer with, being signed as a 16-year-old, there is a lot to like in terms of that development. So I think there are upsides. I'm looking more favorable to him because of that longevity, but we'll see what happens.
I actually love that pick, Theo. I feel like he's a little bit of a trendy, under the radar guy to pop for 2025. Rayne Doncon, good one.
I mean, I could have put Peyton Neal's like around.
I was waiting for that to be the name coming out
today, but even I know, or I'm sorry, Rom. I know Jamie writes for you now, but even I know Peyton Neal's is not a number 11. That's a little too high for him. He's great, but 11's too high.
Right on. Okay, well, we are way past an hour, so here's what we're going to do. This was super fun. Really appreciated comparing notes with you guys. We are going to do a whole prospect mailbag next week with all of the awesome questions that people sent in. So apologies that we didn't get to them today. I really appreciate everyone's interactions and great questions. That's going to tee us up for an entire episode. We will answer every single one of those this time next week. Until then, thank you guys for tuning in. Enjoy the beginning of spring training. We'll catch you soon.